All right, so we are gonna count down our top 10 albums of 1994. And in this video, we're gonna start with our numbers 10 all the way to number 6. And in Dave's channel, we'll have the video posted of the numbers 5 to number 1.
Yeah, this was a crazy year. 1994 was a great year for me. I was 23.
Mhm.
So like I was in the thick of
You
it.
were in, yeah,
I was starting my record label,
yeah.
Mafia Money Records. I started that in 1994. I was living in Seattle, but I left
Mhm.
and I moved to Wisconsin, and that's where I lived the rest of the 90s. So my whole indie music alternative experience that we're going to be talking about in these next records, because that's spoiler alert again, kind of what most of my where most of my records
Yeah,
fall. That was my entire world back then. I mean,
yeah.
23 was the prime age for all this shit.
Yeah, I was 10 when these records came out, so I was maybe a little too young, and
Little
I'll say the
young.
same thing that I mentioned in the in last year's video about 1993. I was way too young to listen to a lot of these records, but even later, when I was a teenager, these records were still pretty big. You could hear them on the radio, you could watch them on MTV. So in a way, they were still pretty big for me, even though they came out a little bit too soon for me.
Well, I've been listening to, I put all of them in one giant playlist and just been putting them on shuffle for the last like 2
Oh
days.
yeah, Mhm.
And it's amazing how many songs that pop up,
Yeah.
because I won't name any of them because we haven't gotten there yet, but how many of them pop up. And I remember a video associated with it because
Mhm.
this stuff was on MTV all the
All
time.
the time. Yeah.
And for kids under the age of like 35 who don't remember that MTV used to play
Mhm.
videos, it
Yeah.
was 24 hours a day videos. And you used to see all of these songs in video form. And it was still a good time. I mean,
Yeah.
MTV died, I don't know, 97, 98 or something like that, but it was
Mhm.
still in full swing in
Yeah.
1994 and had a massive effect on what became popular and what didn't.
Yeah. I think people forget how important that the music videos were.
Hmm.
'Cause that's
My head tells me I shouldn't be here, and my heart says yeah. Yeah.
We'll start with my number 10. And my number 10 is this album, Watusi by The Wedding Present. Now, this is a UK indie band. This is their lone major label album, though. I didn't know them until this record,
Mhm.
but they did have a history in England. They had a number of albums prior, and they were somewhat popular. At some point in the 85, 86 range, they were considered like peers and competitors to the Smiths.
Oh, really? Okay.
But the Smiths took a different path. Wedding Present kind of went more indie and underground, and the
Yeah.
album they made before this, Sea Monsters, was done by Steve Albini, and it kind of had that that some more grungy sort of sound from the early 90s.
Yeah. I was gonna ask you about this band because that's one of the bands out of a few in your list that I was not familiar with when you mentioned them in your list, and
Well,
I think I
I mean,
texted you when I was listening to this one. I said, "Wow, where has this record been all my life? This
I
was
know, I know.
great."
I was actually, of the ones that you didn't know of mine, I wasn't sure that was going to be the one that you would latch onto. That was
I
kind of a
love this one.
surprise, but it's
Yeah.
really, really great. I think it's their best album overall. The main guy is this guy, David Gedge. He writes the songs, and yeah, he's this very lovelorn guy, almost like I don't know, like some of the lyrics are like he's so sad and he's so desperate for like these women's attention or whatever. You almost are like, God damn, the guy's almost a little cringy, but it's
Yeah.
like so good. And the song, yeah, 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 which was
Yeah.
the single off the album, is just so infectious.
I was with the
Um,
single. Makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, I
It's
mean,
really catchy.
and by the way, on this tour in
Yeah.
1994, I saw them. The only
Mm.
time I've ever seen Wedding Present, they were opening for Superchunk
Oh, really?
on their 1994 tour.
Which we maybe we'll talk about Super Chunk later in the video.
It's possible. It's
Yeah.
possible. But the Foolish Tour, which was their
Yeah.
tour from 1994, had
94.
the Wedding Present as an opening band. And I saw that tour in a cafeteria
Hmm.
at the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee,
Oh, really?
in the cafeteria in the middle of the afternoon.
It's-
I will never ever ditch this album. It
yeah.
was out of print for a while and whatever.
Oh,
It's like
really?
this is the best thing in my opinion that they've ever
Yeah.
done. Maybe that's controversial among
Yeah.
Wedding Present fans, but I love that album. It's super unique. It's very, very British, but it's
Yeah.
got almost an American production value because the guitars don't sound twee, they sound
Yeah.
rocking. His voice
That's what I
is
was gonna say too, that it sounds more American than British to me, at least in the, like you said, in the guitars. A little bit of Velvet Undergroundy kind of
Mhm.
guitars, you
I
know.
mean, the sound is more American. His singing is very, very British.
Yeah.
You can tell.
And there was one song that I wrote down. It's called "Shake It,"
Yeah.
where the singer, he sings in kind of like this weird vocal distortion effect thing. Reminded me a lot of the Strokes.
Ah,
The way that Julian Casablanca sings also in the Strokes records. I thought it worked really well in that song. And then there was another one called "Swimming Pools Movie Stars."
Swimming
Really
Pools, Movie
fun
Stars. That's a
track.
great one.
Um, and another thing that I liked about this record is it's a 90s record, but it's not bloated. You know, it doesn't have like 18 tracks and it's like an hour and a half, you know, because this is the CD era.
Right.
So a lot of
And that
bands
is the thing. Bands felt like
put
they had to
in
fill out all
20
74
songs.
minutes. You know,
Yeah.
it's totally not necessary to fill
Yeah,
out
it's
all
unnecessary.
74
It's
minutes
just
of.
straight up 12 songs, 41 minutes. All tracks are killer.
It doesn't sound 1994, but it also doesn't sound dated. It doesn't sound new. It doesn't sound old. It just sounds like this wedding present record. It's like
Yeah.
hard to describe, but great guitar, great songwriting, really kind of desperate vocals if you're sort of into that vibe a little bit
Yeah.
of sort of the song content. He's definitely pouring it all out there.
It's the start of the emo era too, right? Where you're just gonna start hearing a lot of male vocalists singing more about their feelings.
Yeah.
And this may not be an actual emo album, but I think a lot of their vocals were very emotional too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. And speaking of emo,
Oh my God, yes.
my number 10. Let's see. Sunny Day Real Estate Diary, classic
Yeah.
emo.
There's mine. This is my reissue CD.
This is my reissue vinyl. I picked it up last year when I went to see them. Finally, they reunited. Well, they reunited a couple of years ago, I think, but they were
Well,
finally
they've been
playing
reunited a
shows.
few. They've broken up and gotten back together
Yeah.
a couple of times. I saw them last
Mm.
year as well, and I really liked it.
And they finally repressed that record. In my opinion, their best one. Debut album as well. One of the best debut albums, in my opinion. Heavy on the emotional aspect of the lyrics, the vocals, everything is very emotional about it. In my opinion, this is a perfect emo record.
This is the prototypical emo record. When I
Yeah.
see, that's the thing that always has confused me in the 2000s, because when I think of emo rock,
Mm.
this is exactly what I
That's
think of.
emo.
This
Yeah.
is the sound.
Yeah.
So when I hear bands like Good Charlotte or whatever, and people are like, "Oh, it's
Simple
emo,"
Plan.
it's like, is it though? Because I don't. Just because they wear eye makeup or something, that doesn't
Yeah.
make it emo. Like,
I think it lost a lot of its meaning
the
later in the
definition
early
got
2000s.
really changed. It got really changed
Yeah.
over the years.
Yeah.
But bottom line is, this inspired a million bands after
Yeah.
this. I mean, just it would be impossible
Incredibly
to name all of them.
influential. Like everybody was trying to sound like this back in the middle to late 90s, even the early 2000s. Gosh, the first half of this record, it's incredible. Trying to look at the track list here, but 7 in Circles and Song About an Angel. That's the whole of side A.
Yeah.
Incredible. Perfect tracks.
No, the album's all bangers, and obviously the band was so good
Yeah.
that Dave Grohl wanted the Foo Fighters, and he took basically a half of
They
Sunny
took
Day
the
Real Estate.
drummer
The
and the bass
drummer
player.
and the bass player became his band after that. You know, like,
Yeah.
because they were so intense and they were so great at that time, and they imploded
Yeah.
so fast. I mean,
Yeah. I think the drummer ended up getting fired from the Foo Fighters at some point,
he
but
did.
Nate Mandel, he still plays with the Foo Fighters.
Yeah.
There's one thing that is a little bit tough for me about this record, is that it is a very sad record. Everything about it to me screams sadness. You know, it's a lot of a lot of emotions in it. But also the album cover, like all the artwork that you see here. At first look, it almost looks like it's like a children's cartoon, you know, something that's supposed to be fun. But if you take a closer look, it actually has a lot of very dramatic scenes in it.
Yeah.
and you'll see it also in the gatefold and everything. Yeah, all that. I find that a little bit disturbing.
It's
And
definitely a little
that's how
disturbing.
art is supposed to be, right? It's supposed to make you feel things. So I get that, but it's a little bit difficult for me to grab this record and play it on. I have to be in the right mood to listen to it.
I agree 100%. I also have to be in the right mood for that because, yeah, it takes a toll on you. And
Yeah.
also, if you listen to it quiet, it brings one vibe. If you play it really loud, it's like a totally
With the
different
guitars.
vibe.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when the guitars kick in and they are really rocking, it's very intense. But yeah, they can get the really quiet parts and whatever. And yeah, but yeah, Sunny Day Real Estate was on my list too.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
like
was
it
it?
would have made it. Actually, I'm looking at it now. It didn't make my top 20, but it would have been in my top 25.
Oh, really?
So that's
Okay.
just a testament to how good 1994 was because that
Yeah.
album, Sunny Day Real Estate Diary, is so exceptional, and it couldn't even make my top 25 for me because there
Mhm.
was so much great stuff
Yeah.
coming out that year, in my opinion. I mean,
Can't fight the fever. Can't fight the fever. I can't see her till unfolding at the mouth.
My number 9 of 1994 is Veruca Salt,
yep, I got
American
it too.
Thighs.
Another great one.
Another great alternative rock record. So this to me sounds like a very 90s record. You have the heavy guitars, and especially with the combination of the kind of like the high-pitched female vocals from Nina Gordon and Louise Post. I love that contrast. You get the female vocals and the heavy guitars, the heavy sound. Love that contrast. To me, that screams 90s as well. Also, another debut album. Fantastic debut album.
Yeah.
From the Chicago band. Grungy guitars, which I love, very Nirvana-like guitars, maybe more L7 type of guitars.
Well, can I tell you that when their first single came out, which was for Seether off of this song, okay? And, the lyrics are something like, can't fight the Seether. Okay, so all my friends would sing, sounds like the Breeders, because we thought they sounded just like the Breeders, like an indie version of the Breeders when they first came out. That was how my friends and I saw them initially.
Yeah.
And I was in Madison, Wisconsin, and they were from Chicago.
Yeah.
And I remember them. So that was only a 2.5-hour drive. So they played a club show in Madison at a tiny little place called The Chamber. And I went based on the flyer because the girls were so damn cute. In the flyer, I was like, I want to see this band. Not even hearing a song, I went based on the flyer to see.
I have a poster of Veruca Salt. Maybe I'll take a picture. I'll have it framed right here in my wall from that era. It's the Seether single that I found at the record store years ago. I'll put it here in the video so you can take a look.
And they were great. I'm pointing out that they were super cute because they were, but I mean, at the same time, they were also really great at the same. I mean, they came on stage. They were just awesome from the get-go. That debut album was excellent, and I know, they caught a lot of shit like a lot of female bands did 30 years ago, that they wouldn't catch now if they came out because it is a different world. But no, they were great.
Seether, like you mentioned, was a big hit on MTV, especially on like 120 Minutes is the kind of track that they would play a lot. A lot of comparisons with the Breeders. I also like from this record Forsythia. Yeah,
Great
Forsythia. Great track. And I think the second single in this one was number one Blind,
which I've always thought was called Levolor because that's what they say in the song. They go Levolor. I always thought that song was called Levolor. I forgot it was called Levolor.
I think it's a brand of windows, Levolor. So maybe that's why they didn't put it in the in the title.
True. They could maybe get in trouble for that.
However, they did put in Spider-Man and they put in Victrola, which is a brand of turntables, I think.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe they were afraid of the big window. Big business of the window.
Number 9. Okay, my number 9 belongs to Sonic Youth.
Ooh, Sonic Youth.
Experimental, Jet Set, Trash, and No Star. And if
Yeah.
you notice, mine is signed from Lee and Steve
Mine
Shelley.
too.
Yours too?
Yeah, I got it signed by Lee Ronaldo.
Yeah, mine I got signed when I saw Lee Ronaldo in The Dust,
Uh-huh.
and he had Steve Shelley was a member of The Dust, so I had both of
Oh,
them
really?
there.
You got
Yeah.
it both to sign. Okay.
So I got half of Sonic Youth was playing that night, you know? It was no, okay, so let me just a couple of little things about this album. So this was Sonic Youth's 1994 album. I don't know exactly their 8th album, 9th album, 10th, whatever. They've
Eighth.
had so
I wrote it
many
down.
records. What is it?
Number 8.
It's
and
their
Sonic
8th
Youth is
album.
part-
Okay.
Yeah.
I've always had a soft spot for this record because of a couple of things. Number one, it's the only album the band never toured behind in their entire
Oh,
catalog,
really?
and that was because Kim was pregnant at the time.
Oh,
So in the
okay.
video for Bull in the Heather,
Bull in the
you
Heather,
see her, she's
yeah.
pregnant, and Kathleen Hanna is running around
Yeah, she's
dancing in that
dancing
video for
around.
most of the time. Kim's
Yeah.
just sort of standing there because she was pregnant.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
like
is that why they have her there?
well, I don't know. I mean, they might have just had it for additional reasons. I'm not exactly
Okay.
sure, um, but again, they worked with Butch Vig mixed the record. He had
Mhm.
done their previous one, Dirt. I think he recorded or produced that album. He didn't produce this one, but he mixed it. And I don't know. It's a Sonic Youth album with primarily short songs.
Yeah.
And that's unusual for Sonic Youth because even back then they would have a couple of short ones, but they were still into the extended noise jams. They
Mhm.
didn't do that really on this one. But I like every single song on here. I mean, Winter Bull in the Heather, the obvious single,
That
but
was a
like
big hit too. They would play that video on MTV all the time.
it was a lot. Yeah. Screaming Skull was great. Self-Obsessed
Really?
and Sexy was a single. Androgynous Mind. Doctor's Orders. There's a great on the if you can find it. I don't know if it's still out there. If you can find the CD single for Bull in the Heather,
Uh-huh.
comes with a bonus track of Doctor's Orders being sung by Thurston, whereas it's
Oh,
sung by
really?
Kim on the album.
Really?
So it called the T-Vox version or whatever. It's great.
Huh.
Tokyo Eyes. I mean, the whole album is really excellent. You go Daydream Nation, you go Goo, you go Dirty, you go Experimental Jet Set, and then Washing Machine, the pinnacle, right?
Yeah.
That's just a solid stretch of records. And I could go pre Daydream Nation, but this
Mhm.
is not a discussion about the entire Sonic Youth catalog. We're just talking about Experimental Jet Set. But man, I don't know. Those
Yeah.
are the thoughts on mine. I love it all the way
This is definitely Sonic Youth kind of like playing with the peak of their powers, right? They're doing what they do best. I also wrote down Screaming Skull. I
Mhm.
don't know if you've read the lyrics for Screaming Skull.
Is that the one where he says all the band names where he's like,
Yeah,
Husker
so
Du?
they
Like,
mentioned SST, of course, Lemonheads, Pat Smear, Superchunk,
Superchunk. Yep.
Husker Du. So I don't know exactly. I have trouble making meaning of the songs, but to me it sounds like they're at the store, like a record store, and going through all the different albums that they like. I'm not sure.
It could be just celebrating that era
Yeah,
of just
the
all this
90s era.
cool stuff. And
But I think we forgot to mention like the record labels in these records, but this one came out on DGC, which is the same record label as Nirvana, of course. So
yeah. And that's it, you know, again, if you don't know the story,
Mhm.
like Sonic Youth kind of gave Nirvana permission to go to a major label because they had done it the year before, signed
right,
with
yeah.
DGC, and it was okay. And so then Kurt kind of talked with Thurston and Kim about it
Yeah.
and kind of got the permission structure to be like, all right, I mean, I guess it's okay for us to sign to a major label. I don't think
Yeah.
they really needed that much permission because I think Kurt wanted to anyways, but
Yeah.
so coming in at number 8, and again, if this were me in 1994 and we
Mhm.
were doing this, even though the internet really wasn't around back then, this would be my number 1. But here
Oh,
it is,
really?
number 8,
Mhm.
Guided by Voices, B1000. I became so obsessed with this band
Really?
this time. This was I had been hearing a little bit about them prior, but you know, again, you couldn't just go on the internet and check somebody out. You had to actually go to a store and buy it if you
Yeah.
if you were reading about
Physical
somebody.
copy, yeah.
So this was the first one. I saw that Spiders of the Earth tour or some shit. It was like Guided by Voices. It was a Scat Records, which was the label that
Mhm.
they were on, along with two other bands, and they were doing a tour. And they came to the University of Wisconsin, played out on the water, out on the terrace, and that was my first Guided by Voices experience. And I've been obsessed with them ever
Mhm.
since. This is 100% lo-fi.
Yeah.
Not lo-fi with like, hey, we want it to sound bad, but they are using a 4-track tape
Intentionally.
recorder, recording in their basement. Robert
Mhm.
Pollard was a teacher, a
Mhm.
full-time teacher, and a full-time drunk, and
Yeah.
was him and Tobin Sprout would basically make these recordings in his basement in the middle of the night, like all night long, and then he'd go to work and as his teacher.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're lo-fi. They're using a 4-track. But the songs are so amazing on this one.
Yeah.
Some of the most Stone Cold Guided by Voices classics, like of all time, appear on this album. Some of their
Yeah, the big one, I Am a Scientist. That's
I'm a
the one that they play
Scientist
at
is
the radio
obviously
all the
one of
time.
their best ones ever. I'm gonna have to.
Hot Freaks. Hot Freaks is
I
in
would
it,
say Tractor Rape Chain, Gold Heart Mountaintop, Queen Directory, Smothered in Hugs, Gold Star for Robot Boy,
Yeah.
Kicker of Elves, I'm a Scientist. I mean, just hardcore UFOs.
Queen of Cans and Jars. I wrote that one down.
Another great one.
Ethos Myron. It's
Echoes
kinda like
Myron,
a
yeah. No,
college
that's another
professor
good one
kind
too.
of
That's another
title.
good one. I mean, God, every song, and some of them are like, there'll be some songs that are like 40 seconds. You
Yeah.
know, this was the charm of Guided by Voices back then, is he would have a partial idea, but it was so good that they just kind of include it. So that's why there's 20 something songs and it's still not really long.
It's not a long
because a
album.
lot of them are pretty
I wrote it
short.
down. 20 songs, 36 minutes.
Right. They're not
So
very
shorter
long.
than most records out there, especially from the 90s.
But
This is the perfect example that really the production, the mixing doesn't really matter that much as long as your songs are good. If you write good songs, that's what's important in the
because it was
record.
their sound at this time, anyways. It was lo-fi, but it was a mix of British Invasion, 60s British Invasion music, and 70s guitar rock. You know?
So this one, like you said, it sounds like very raw. Some of the songs, especially the way that it's produced or recorded, sound a little bit unfinished. But like you said, that's part of the charm of it.
Mhm.
I like the lo-fi aspect of it. I think it goes very well. It seems like almost sounds like a demo record, and in a way, it reminds me of what Westerberg would do later on with his I forgot the name, stereo and mono kind of thing.
Right, where he would just
He would
record in the
go into
basement
his
and just
closets, put in the cassette, and whatever came out, whatever he played live at that point, that's what would go in the record.
right.
So
And there's
very,
obvious mistakes. You hear them fucking up on stuff.
yeah,
It's just like, but the general vibe was good.
yeah,
And the rest of it was fine. They just let it go.
yeah,
And if it ends abruptly, well, that's where it ends.
yeah,
You know, and they
exactly.
just
Runs
maybe
out of
hit the
tape.
next track. Now I know how that can infuriate some people, like that just don't like that because it sounds tossed off, but it's not. I mean, they put a lot of thought into that stuff. They just didn't put a lot of. They weren't going to labor over the recordings over and over and over and over.
The second that I saw them, I wanted them
So my number 8 is Sugar. Oh, you got it on vinyl, nice.
And this is
Only
an
got it on
OG
CD.
on
Nice.
Ryko disc.
Ryko disc.
See the Ryko right there.
This one also came out on Ryko, but this is the CD version I found at the record store a long time ago. Yeah, this is the second and final Sugar album. Of course, the second project from Bob Mould after Husker Du broke up. I'm gonna say a little bit something that's maybe a little controversial for a lot of your subscribers. I think I like Sugar better than Husker Du.
Yeah, that
And
is controversial.
part of it, I think it's because I don't know, the production level in Husker Du to me is a little bit rough. And I know we were talking about production before, but this one is a lot cleaner, a little bit more accessible to me. I can actually hear the vocals a little bit better. The separation between the instruments are a little bit better. And the melodies in this album are incredible.
Yeah.
One more thing that also may be a little bit controversial is I think a lot of the songs in this record are pop punk. And not pop punk, like we were saying before, that it's Good Charlotte and Simple Plan and things like that. This is like real pop punk, in a way that my definition of pop punk is that it's just melodic punk. So to me, this is one of the greatest examples of pop punk, especially with those guitars that he does in Your Favorite Thing. There will be like a ton of new bands that will come out after this record trying to do the same thing. The
opening track, just Gift, with this
Gift.
all that wall of guitar. See, because I think what he's mixing is, there's that pop punk element, but he was also very inspired by shoegaze and My Bloody Valentine and bands like that, and he wanted that wall of whooshing guitars and all that stuff, and to be really loud and everything. And while I will not go with you to the extent of saying that I like Sugar better than Husker Du, I don't, but I do love Sugar. I mean, they were phenomenal. The only reason this didn't make my top 10, because I do like this album a tremendous amount, is because I'm stuck comparing it to Copper Blue, which was the first Sugar album. Great. And that album is a absolute 10 out of 10 masterpiece.
Yeah.
And this one's maybe like a 9 or 8 out of 10 for me. So it just falls a little bit lower. And I guess maybe in my brain, that's what's making it not a top 10 for me personally. But yeah, Sugar was like more accessible Husker Du. I mean, he tried to do the Husker Du sound with more bigger production. Yeah. And I get it. Look, it's his sound too. I mean, and it was like, oh, Bob Mould's doing the Husker Du sound. He was in Husker Du, for fuck's sake, He's allowed to do that. It's his sound too,
Yeah.
So I never had a problem with him going for that bigger sound. Like I got it, and it worked. It was
they had a couple of hits in here.
Stuff, of his entire career was the Sugar stuff.
Lori Myers used to live upstairs. Our parents had been friends for years. Almost every after.
All right, so my number 7 of 94 is NoFX. Speaking of punk rock. And this one's
this is one that I had never listened to all the way through prior to this.
Great record. So a little bit of background on this. So as you know, I'm a huge Green Day fan. I grew up listening to Green Day. And Green Day kind of opened the door to all these other punk rock bands, especially from the California area. And at some point, if you listen to a lot of Green Day, if you have a buddy that has an older brother, will tell you, hey, stop listening to Green Day. That's not real punk rock. Listen to this stuff. Listen to NoFX. Listen to Pennywise. Listen to Bad Religion. That's real punk rock. And of course, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. To me, this one really stood out to me. Great punk rock. But yeah, great tracks. A fun record. The lyrics are very clever. What Fat Mike does in this record is fantastic. Some of his best songwriting. There's one track in here where Tim Shattuck of the Muffs makes an appearance.
I didn't even notice that.
Most people that listen to NoFX will have this one as their number 1 record. This is their most popular one. This one was the one that has most of the hits. Linoleum, it's a song that they play live all the time. It's the classic NoFX song. Don't Call Me White. I think
Don't Call Me White. That was the one that I recognized from when I was
the single. If you listen to a lot of the Sirius XM punk, you'll listen to that one a lot. But it also has a lot of the anthemic kind of tracks, like The Bruise and what was it, The Cause, track number 4. A fantastic pop punk record. I think I like the vocals from Fat Mike. It may be a little bit difficult to get into his vocals because he's so he has a lot of snarl in his vocals.
Yeah.
But that was the sound of the era, and if you were listening to punk in that era, I think you will get into that one.
No, I think for me it was like I didn't love the album. It was okay. I think I never liked what was called like SoCal punk, like where it was like you said, Bad Religion, Pennywise,
Lagwagon.
A lot of the bands from that era, like I just never got into them. And it's not like I gave them a shot and didn't like it. It was just like I just sort of surface level decided that wasn't really my scene. I tried Bad Religion because Bad
Uh-huh.
Religion was in the 80s, and so they weren't new
Yeah,
to
they
the
were a little
90s.
bit older. Yeah.
But and I didn't really like Bad Religion as much because I thought they were too wordy. Like it was just like they use less words. Like that's what I wanted. I wanted to simplify it.
Yeah.
But what? So this isn't necessarily my thing. I thought they were a good example of it. I remembered "Don't Call Me White." I remembered "Linoleum." I remembered a couple other tracks, but
Yeah.
I don't think I'd listened to it all the way through. Like
I think the difference
maybe I
between
had
this
30 years ago, but I hadn't recently.
I think the difference between us is that maybe this record is the kind of music that appeals to teenagers more than people that were already in their 20s.
Right. I was in my 20s at that point.
Yeah.
It did seem kind of like teenagery and juvenile,
Yeah.
but at the same time, Bad Religion was trying to be too intellectual for me. Like it was just like,
that too.
it's too
Bad
much
Religion
a
will
little
do
bit.
that too. Yeah. One cool thing about NoFX, to any NoFX fans out there, is this book. Maybe you will read it for the Rock and Roll Book Club.
Yeah.
The Hepatitis Bathtub and Other Stories. Really cool book. It goes into detail on how they wrote a lot of the songs in the records. And what's cool about this book is that it's not written by a single author. It's written by the entire band. They
the Motley
take
Crue book is
turns.
like that too. Just FYI, they all.
Oh, really?
And I don't know if they do the same thing, but the editorial design of the way the Motley Crue book was done is they all were interviewed separately, but sometimes they're recounting the same story.
Oh, really?
So you get like
a different
Tommy Lee will
perspective?
tell one part of it, and then Nikki, and it's different, but they're
Yeah.
talking about the same exact story.
They remember it differently, huh?
They remember it differently. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's how this book is as well. And they even bring some older members of the band to write some of the chapters, which I thought it was really cool. And one thing that I didn't realize after reading this, before reading this book, was that a lot of the songs here they follow like not traditional song structure, where a lot of the songs don't even have a chorus, or some of them don't even have verses. It's just a chorus.
Weird.
And that's how Fat Mike writes his song. Whatever comes into his head is what he puts down, and he makes it sound like a normal song, but it isn't. It is just structure very different than traditional songs.
Interesting.
It's not eternal, imperishable. Oh yes, it will go. It's not eternal, interminable.
My number 7 is Stereolab, Mars Audiac Quintet. Now,
Yeah.
this is an unusual record. I had no idea what you were going to think of this. I love this
Yeah.
album. This is the third album by this band, which is part British, part French. They somehow were on Elektra Records in the 90s, which is mind-blowing, but they had 4 or 5 albums on Elektra. They are so experimental and so weird, and they use Moog synthesizers that kind of drone the sound. Like you get this distorted keyboards a lot of times with these vocals that are very sometimes hard to understand what they're saying, because sometimes they are in French. The singer's name Laetitia Sadier, and she does sing in French, and a lot of times they're singing like very like Marxist, communist, like
Oh,
very
really?
far left
Okay.
wing stuff that they're
I
singing
didn't know
about,
that.
but you don't know what they're you have no idea what they're really saying because half of it's in French. But
Yeah.
I love these guys, and they formed in 1990. They are like Laetitia Sadier and this guy Tim Gain, and they were the primary writers,
Yeah.
and then they filled out the band. I only got into them by accident.
Mhm.
Okay. They were opening for the band Unrest in 1993, and I was going to see Unrest because I knew them. They're DC indie band, and the opener was Stereolab, and I had them confused with somebody else, maybe like the Stereo MCs or somebody else, and I decided that they sucked,
Not the
and
same.
I didn't want to go. I didn't want to see them, so I was like, I purposely wanted to show up late so I wouldn't have to see this stereo band.
Yeah.
But the show was running late, and I got there, and that's exactly when Stereolab started, and they blew me the fuck away. Like, I could not believe how amazing they were live. I don't even remember seeing Unrest after that. I have no memory of them, of
Really?
Unrest.
Mhm.
But Stereolab was just incredible.
Yeah.
Again, it's very hard to think that a major label thought this was going to sell a lot of records. I mean, the single was called Wow and Flutter, and that's the
I wrote
second
that one
song.
down. That's one of my
And that's
favorites.
maybe the most sort of traditionally poppy song, but a lot of them, they're very 60s keyboard sounding. They do have a lot of droning going on, the
Mhm.
non-traditional singing and melodic stuff. But
Yeah, I didn't know much of Stereolab before. Stereolab is a band that I was that's cool. That I was aware of for many years. Maybe I've heard a few of their songs before, and whenever I hear a band that sounds like that, like Stereolab, I think, oh, that sounds like a Stereolab, right? So you hear like Always or An Attendant Anna. Okay, this
Mhm.
guy sounded almost exactly like Stereolab. So I know what they sound like, but I never actually listened to a full record from them. Uh, yes, a very typical kind of Stereolab sound, like you said, very unique. Some of the lyrics, like you said, in French, it doesn't matter what language they're speaking
well,
because the music
ordinarily,
is
let me
great.
not to interrupt you, but ordinarily that would bother me. Because
You
I'm
don't
like a
like
typical
yeah,
American. If it's not in
yeah.
English, dude, you better fuck it. I don't want to hear it. You know, like I won't watch a movie with subtitles. I'm like,
Oh,
no,
really?
you better cater it to me. But
Yeah,
this is a band, I don't care that they're singing in French and I can't understand
yeah.
it. I'm just like, so what, man? It's cool. I
Mhm.
don't know. You know, I only found out later, like all this Marxism, communism stuff, because I just didn't really, I didn't know what they were saying. I didn't care. I
Yeah.
mean, who cares? I mean, it's just like, but man, yeah, it is ordinarily that would bother me.
It's what the kind of stuff that transcends the language, right? You can still enjoy it even if it's in a
Yeah,
different language.
yeah.
I love the melodies. I love the spacey kind of vibes. Playful at some points as well. It's a fun record,
Mhm.
to listen to for sure. That this is a little bit of a longer record. It does have only 15 songs, but it goes over an hour. But it doesn't feel like a long record because it's just so fun to listen to. You can have it on and
When you
have a
lock
good
in, when it
time.
locks in, it's
Mm,
just like it does. There's like this groove, this kind of trance feel, and it's like all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I've been listening to this album for 40 minutes. Like I'm on track
yeah.
8 or what, like you didn't even
Mhm.
realize like how fast it goes by. But
Kill all your friends. Make fun, but not pretend, yeah.
okay, my number 6 is this album, The Stars Are Insane by the New York band called Verses. And this was a big record to me back at this time. So these guys
Teen
are from
Beat
New
Records.
what's that? Teen
Teen
Beat
Beat
Records, right?
Records.
Which was the label that Unrest founded. It was the guys from Unrest.
Oh, really?
They
Okay.
formed Teen
There's a
Beat,
connection there.
right? And they signed Versus. Versus had an EP out before this that I also have called I'm blanking on it, but I'll put a picture up of it. Oh, Let's Electrify, called Let's Electrify. That's awesome. But this is unique in their catalog as just amazing. There were a couple of brothers in this band. So there's a Richard Balliot is the guitarist and vocalist. His brother Edward Balliot was the drummer. And for a
Mhm.
while they had a third brother was also in the band as a second guitarist, but he wasn't always in there. And then Fontaine Toops is the woman who plays bass and sings.
Mhm.
And little bit of a Sonic Youth vibe to a certain
Yeah,
extent for
I
sure.
noticed that too, in the guitars
Um,
for sure.
with the guitars and stuff, and they do have that quiet, loud dynamic and
Yeah.
everything. I really, really love the vocals and the way he sings on it. I like when Fontaine sings. I like when, in a Pixies way, how she'll do the Kim
It's
Deal role and back up him when he's made in the
it's
main.
that combination of the male and female vocals.
Right. It's
Great
it's a good
contrast.
combination. I
Yeah.
like Fontaine's solo stuff, on her own. I think Wind Me Up was her song.
Mhm.
And maybe one of the other ones too. I can't remember.
Mhm.
Follow maybe, or one of those. But man, this album is just so intense. And I used to love that uh, B9, which is
I
the
wrote that
rocker,
one, B9.
I mean,
Mhm.
great riffing. And also it does kind of get
Mhm.
into that sort of quieter,
Mhm.
meandering sort of Sonic Youth era. When I was talking about the King Hannah record, I compared them to Verses, but it was
Oh,
a
okay,
comparison
I
that
can see
nobody
that.
seemed to remember because nobody
Uh-huh.
remembered Verses, I guess,
And
unfortunately. But
that's what I was gonna mention because out of our both of our lists, this is probably the most underground band out of all the bands in the lists. Only 3,000 monthly listeners in Spotify, which is
wow, people
prime.
forgot them. Wow.
Uh, so very low. I thought it was surprisingly low because the record is great. Especially now that a lot of the kind of like the shoegaze stuff is coming back, you would think that more people will listen to them. But like you said, heavy Sonic Youth influence, loud, quiet, loud, Pixies-like type of sound. I wrote down Solar Democrat, which was
That's
a
a
little
great
bit
tune.
of a banger in the record. And like you said, I love the combination of the male and female vocals. And
You know, their follow-up album had a red cover on it. I'm seeing it right now. And then they signed to Caroline Records and did their sort of high profile record after this.
mhm.
And I remember thinking it wasn't as good. And that's where I sort of left Versus at that point. And I'm considering going back and re-listening to those later records
The
because
later
they broke
records.
up in the early 2000s and now they're back together again
Oh, are they?
on a low key sort of part-time basis. But I would very much like to give some of those other records a chance because re-listening to this made me remember how much I love this band. And that's what
But
happened.
this is a good record. I like the vibes overall, kind of like a moody type of vibe,
Mhm.
like you said, like the Sonic Youth kind of thing. Also, maybe the lyrics a little bit emo as well.
I was going to
Uh,
say an emotional Sonic Youth because they are
Definitely
very emotional in the lyrics.
sounds like there's some songs about relationships or love songs.
Well, I think "Wind Me Up," which is one of Fontaine's songs, is also like it was kind of it was pretty sad, like kind of emo-ish, you know, a little bit in the lyrics. "Blade of Grass" is a really good one. You already said "Solar Democrat," yeah. "B9," "Deseret." I mean, God, it's so good. I mean,
Great
and
album.
again, an album that I don't think any of our viewers are probably going to even remember
No.
it, but you say it is streaming though, right? So they can at least go and
Yeah,
stream it.
it
So
is on Spotify. All
worth
the records
finding.
are.
This is just God, it's so good.
Make your head go bop, 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 bop. Laying the red man, and not so much a Caesar. And proficiency!
Let's see, my number 6, Frank Black, Teenager of the Year. I also have the CD version of it. This is the one that came out on Record Store Day, maybe
This
a
is
couple of
my
years
this is my
ago.
OG from the '90s, back in the '90s.
Nice. It came out on 4AD Records. Yes, 4AD Records. Yeah, this is the repress that came out. Much needed
Yeah,
repress.
the CD says 480 and Electra, but you know that
Electra. I think
Electra.
in the US they came out on Electra. The vinyl is from 4AD.
Electra was a great label in the '90s. I mean, they had
Yeah.
they had the Pixies, they had
It's
the
been mentioned quite a
Breeders.
few times in this video so
Yeah,
far.
they had a lot of good stuff.
Double record as well, so a little bit on the longer side. A little bit of a longer record for Frank Black. This is what he did. His second record as a solo artist after the Pixies broke up initially back in the 90s. And it could have been, I guess, another Pixies record because it does have a lot of that similar kind of style of the Pixies, but with a lot more acoustic guitars, which I love when the Pixies and Frank Black he does his acoustic rhythm guitar throughout the songs. Start a little bit of a crazy start for the record because it has that Pong
Welcome
song.
to Whatever Happened to Pong.
Sounds like a punk song.
Yeah.
Amazing. I love that opener. Overall, like the whole beginning of the album is amazing. Thalassocracy is one of my favorite songs from Frank Black.
I love this album. I mean, I want to live on an abstract plane. I mean, just like every song on here, The Vanishing Spies,
Vanishing
Headache
Spies,
was
Speedy
great.
Marie.
Freedom Rock is hysterical.
Yeah.
I love the lyrics on that one. I
Yeah.
mean, when it's like this didn't make my list, but it would have been in my, extended
Extended
list
list.
for sure.
Yeah.
There's just no doubt about it. Frank
Yeah.
Black's first 2 post Pixies albums are
Mhm.
amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just like, it's funny because even on Trompe Le Monde, the final Pixies album, he was bringing out songs that go back to their first demo tape. Like,
The Purple
so they
Tape or
were
whatever.
obviously all these songs weren't just pouring out of him at that time. Breaking free of the Pixies, it seemed like he just unleashed all of these songs because this
Yeah.
has like fucking 22 songs.
Yeah,
And
it's a
so
long
does
album.
the self-titled album has a lot of songs too. He was just exploding with creativity. This
Yeah.
stuff, they're almost all bangers.
Yeah.
I do think, he kind of moved away from the more Pixie sound with
Mhm.
the next album and some of his other next couple solo records. But like,
Yeah.
man, this is the goods. I mean, it is excellent.
It's a
Absolutely
fantastic
excellent.
album, and it also it didn't do commercially. It didn't do as well as the Breeders, of course, because the Breeders had huge hits. But it did have a minor hit, which was "Headache,"
Yeah,
which was
great song.
A great song. It played on the radio all the time. It also has Joey Santiago on guitars, so you have a little bit of the Pixies connection in there. So you have a little bit of the Pixies style guitars in it. And I also wrote down Speedy Marie,
Oh, that's a good one too.
Thalassocracy. That's a crazy, quick, fast, funky tune that I always loved from him in this record, and
Calistan.
which was
I-
also covered by Kim Shattuck of the Muffs in her
Really?
side project, The Beards. She does
Ooh.
an amazing cover of that song.
I did not know that.
Um,
I Could Stay Here Forever is great.
yeah,
Yeah, God, so many of these are just excellent. And you see these ones, Pure Denizen of the Citizens Band. It's like, I'm not even sure I remember that song, but it's like the titles are so funny.
yeah. The titles are really wacky, and
I Want to Live on an Abstract Plane. That's still one of my favorites.
yeah, that's one of the big ones too.
But
I don't know,
yeah,
just
no,
a
this is
great record.
excellent. And
Mm.
I think that, you know, the 90s were so image conscious and stuff, and maybe that's,
Mm.
you know, Frank Black wasn't able to catch a break as much as the Breeders because they visually he just wasn't as
He
interesting.
didn't look as
looking or
good as
something.
the guy from the Lemonheads for sure.
Right, he definitely didn't look as good as Evan Dando. He didn't look as good as Kim Deal.
Yeah.
And it was a visual era, but man, I mean, there's 22 songs. I bet you 20 of them are bangers. I mean, I can't even really tell you like if there's a bad song, just maybe one that's not as good.
Yeah.
But it's God, it was great.
Yeah.
All right, so those were our picks for 1994 from number 10 to number 6. Now, the top 5, our picks from number 5 to number 1, should be live now in Dave's channel, The Dark Stuff. So I'll put a link here in the description so you can go ahead and check that one out. Thank you for watching until the end, and see you there. Bye-bye.